I had been with Luna for 8 years. 8 long years that looking back now, I realize I was never truly present for. She was the kindest person I had ever met, a soul so gentle and extraordinary that at times she made me suffocate with the feeling that I didn't deserve her. I loved her in the way a selfish person loves, desperate to keep her, yet never mature enough to protect her. And because of that, on the 5th of September last year, I lost everything. That day, Luna looked at me with a strangely calm expression. She had suspected for a while, and when she asked, she simply said, "If you've really done something wrong, the only good thing you can do for me is tell the truth." I confessed, not out of courage, but because I knew I couldn't keep lying anymore. But even in confessing, I was still a liar. I had continued betraying her until that very day. Everything unraveled in just a few hours. I told her everything, piece by piece, as if peeling off my own skin, and each layer was rotten. I had exchanged sexual messages with someone for 8 years, cheated 3 times, twice with escorts, once with someone I met on a dating app, then had 2 emotional affairs, and countless times sought cheap stimulation online. That wasn't all. I had yelled at her when she cried, broken things, stormed out in the middle of the night, and even hurt myself just to force her to comfort me. For 8 years, I lived like someone who only knew how to love his own misery. After everything was exposed, I tried to do anything I could to fix it. I swore I wouldn't lie again, swore I'd live decently, though I didn't even know what decent meant. Luna said she no longer loved me, but she wasn't ready to let go yet. During those days, we clung to each other in desperate intimacy, the kind people call hysterical bonding. I knew she was only using her kindness to say goodbye to something already dead, but I clung to it like a drowning man. The next month and a half, I lived in a daze. I answered all her questions, endured her anger, tried to prove I was changing, but I kept failing. I cried, begged, poured all my emotions onto her, forcing her to comfort me instead of having space to heal. She patiently showed me how to listen, how not to turn my pain into someone else's burden. But I only learned it for a moment, then repeated the same mistakes. I truly broke down when Luna began saying she wanted to meet other people. She had only just tried Tinder, sent a few messages, hadn't crossed any line, yet even that drove me insane. I grew jealous. I pleaded. I made her feel guilty for something she had every right to do. And when I thought I was fighting for love, I was really just trying to reclaim control over someone I had already drained dry. Then today, when I thought things had hit rock bottom, I dug even deeper. In the morning, I held her in my arms, and a wave of panic hit me. I got out of bed while she was still asleep and went to look for an engagement ring. In my head, a delusional plan formed. If I proposed, maybe she would believe I was sincere. I came home and tried to hide it with a stupid excuse. "Don't worry, just a personal errand." Of course, Luna knew right away. She was angry, but then softened, saying she'd try one more time. I thought that was salvation. I didn't know that just a few hours later, I would destroy even that fragile trust with my own hands. That afternoon, I told a coworker about our breakup, that Luna was starting to see other people. I said it without malice, only so they could cover my shift. But I hadn't asked for her permission. When Luna found out, she was silent for a long time. It was the kind of silence that told me the last thread between us had begun to fray. Elena was born into hardship. She had seen too much loss, betrayal, and exploitation. And for the past 8 years, instead of being her refuge, I became another burden. She still took care of her family, looked after sick relatives, endured endless exploitation, and yet never stopped being kind. Meanwhile, I only resented her for not giving me all her time. I loved her, but I was also angry that her love didn't come the way I wanted it to. Once, she begged me to move to a cheaper place so she could work again and support us both. I refused, saying it wasn't fair to me, that I deserved a better study environment while she had to keep working. Looking back now, that was the moment I lost my humanity. I wish I could go back and simply say, "All right, let's move." That evening, when Luna went into another room to cool off, I sat down to work on her laptop, planning to clean it up to make it run faster, to help her study and work. Then, in a blind moment, I connected her phone and read her messages. I didn't even need to know what they said. I just wanted to hurt myself, to see if I could bear it. But the program froze. I clicked around wildly, and a few seconds later, her phone lit up with a notification. She came out, her eyes no longer angry, just empty. I lied, but even I knew there was no reason to anymore. She looked at me, shook her head, and walked away. I have lost everything. No more sex, no more intimacy, no more of the gentle gaze I once knew. Luna said that if I stayed, I would only face her hatred and anger. And even knowing that, I begged to stay. Maybe because I didn't know how to do anything else but cling. I knew I was wrong the moment I opened her phone, just like I knew I was wrong every time I cheated, but did it anyway. I didn't feel desire, didn't enjoy it. I was just an addict to self-destruction, throwing myself into actions that made me despise myself, then begging for forgiveness again. I've done that all my life, and I don't understand why I can't stop. Elena once said, "You don't know what honesty means, do you?" Back then, I denied it. But now I know she was right. I'm a liar down to my bones. I lie to be loved, to be forgiven, to avoid shame. I tell myself I'm a good person just because I feel remorse. But remorse doesn't heal anyone. It's only a way to keep believing I can still be saved. Now, I don't know what to do with myself. I've realized my lack of empathy runs frighteningly deep. I only start caring about consequences when everything has already exploded. Before that, I always thought I was the victim, that everyone hurt me, and they deserved payback. I lived under the illusion that my unhappiness justified all my wrongs. Only when I look back do I see I was the source of all the ruin. I love Luna, but I now understand that kind of love might only have been possessiveness. She once said, "You love me within the limits of what you're capable of, but those limits are too narrow for anyone to be safe in." I didn't want to believe her, but maybe she was right. I convinced myself I was changing, that I was different, until I lied again. Still, in my heart, she remains the only thing that means anything. I know it sounds selfish, but I can't deny it. Every choice I made, even the wrong ones, revolved around her. I just wish I had truly chosen her, instead of choosing the image of myself in the relationship. I wish I had moved with her, become her partner instead of her destroyer. This past month, when I tried to be sincere, I realized we could have had a simple, peaceful, happy life. And that realization hurts more than any punishment. Elena said there's only pain left ahead. I understand. I've killed the last good thing between us. She told me to go, that she had nothing left to give me. I begged. She smiled faintly and said that if I wanted to stay and face her anger, then stay. I said I wanted to. Maybe she didn't think I really would. But if that's all I deserve, I'll accept it. The bitterest part of the past 2 months is that Luna, the one I betrayed, has been the one comforting me. She smiles at me, still showers with me, still holds me at night. Sometimes we still have moments so close that I almost forget what I've lost. She listens to me talk about my mistakes and even says, "I'm sorry you're in so much pain. I wouldn't wish this on anyone." I cried, but instead of feeling grateful, I begged her to love me again. She said, "All your chaos has made me numb." She only truly cried once, the first day everything came out. After that, she shed tears only a few more times, softly, as if she had no tears left. I cried every night, but they were no longer tears of love. They were tears of fear of facing myself. All I had to do was ask her, but I chose to lie. All I had to do was be honest, but I hid. I don't know what's wrong with me, only that every time I hurt someone, I discover another dark corner of myself I'm too afraid to face. Now I wonder if anyone has ever been like me, destroyed with their own hands the most precious thing in their life, lost the only person who still believed in the small good left in them. I don't know if there's anything left to save between Luna and me. Probably not. But maybe the only thing left to do is learn to be honest. Not to be forgiven, but to stop hurting anyone else again. If anyone has read this far, thank you for listening to the confession of someone far too late to make things right. I don't expect pity or advice. I only hope that by speaking it out loud, I can begin to look at what's left of the human part inside me. The part Luna, even when she no longer loved me, once tried to save.
Sometimes, people don't lose the one they love because of a single event, but because of 1,000 small cracks they create every day. Through words, through silence, through the quiet dishonesty they don't even notice. Tonight, we'll listen to a man named Adrian Cole share the story of his 8-year journey with the woman he loved most, Luna, and how he ended up destroying it all with his own hands. Not because he didn't know how to love, but because he never learned how to love without causing pain. This isn't a story about betrayal in the usual sense. It's a story of a man slowly seeing himself in the mirror and realizing that among all the lies he's ever told, the one truth he feared to speak most was the one he owed to himself. For Adrian, September 5th, 2023 wasn't just the day everything collapsed. It was the day truth began. We'll hear his story not to forgive, but to understand. What drives a person to go so far only to realize they've been standing on the wrong side of love their entire life? This is The Day I Lost Luna, a confession and perhaps the first step on the road back to becoming human. Before we begin tonight's story, I'd like to invite everyone to subscribe to the channel to help share this story with others who might be going through something similar. And don't hesitate to leave a comment below to share your sincere advice for our guest.
I agree that she deserves a better life. I once believed I could give that to Luna, a peaceful, fulfilled life where she would no longer have to fear or endure. But now I understand that things have gone too far, and perhaps I was the very reason those good things could never come true. I will seek therapy. I've tried before, but I never truly succeeded in letting anyone touch the broken parts inside me. I was afraid, or maybe I wasn't ready to be honest with myself. But now I have no other choice. Elena once told me something very similar to what you just said, that if I truly loved her, that love had to come with safety and kindness, not fear and pain. I don't know exactly what I feel for her. It isn't simple desire, nor mere obsession. For 8 years, despite all the mistakes, we still had moments of genuine happiness. Times when we laughed together, ate together, lived together without needing words. She was the person who made the world feel worth living in, and I think I brought her a small piece of that joy too. We were once inseparable. Now to her, all of that feels like lies, and I understand why. I've tainted every memory we shared. But when I say I love her, that feeling is still here. Something deeper than lust, different from possession, though I can't yet name it. Maybe it's love, or maybe it's the last good part of me struggling to survive. I don't know anymore. I only know that whenever I think of her, I feel both loss and gratitude. Because at least once in my life, I had someone like her, even if I didn't know how to keep her.
Adrian, maybe what you're feeling isn't love, but need, or more precisely, dependency. I'm not saying this to attack you, but to ask a hard question. Is it attachment or just the fear of emptiness when there's no one left to cling to? You know, you once had the power to persuade, to manipulate, to make Luna stay even when she was exhausted. You knew how to make someone who loved you feel guilty for wanting to leave. And when you lost someone like her, what terrified you wasn't just loneliness. It was losing the illusion that you were still loved, even after you had destroyed that love yourself. If you don't confront the wreckage inside you, you'll eventually seek someone else like Luna. Someone gentle enough, trusting enough, forgiving enough to stay. So you can keep repeating the same cycle. A relationship that looks like love, but is really a stage where your unhealed wounds perform themselves again and again. I'm not speaking to your rational side, Adrian. I'm speaking to the deeper part, the primal wound, where you learn to love through fear, through control, through the obsession of holding on to what's familiar, even as it destroys you both. That part of you is fighting to survive by resisting change, even though the life it clings to has already decayed. It grabs onto anyone close enough just to avoid facing yourself. But the truth is this: you don't need someone to hold on to. You need a reason to be honest. And until you find that, every love that comes after, no matter whose face it wears, will only ever be another version of the same pain.
Elena made me think a lot about what she called the inner logic behind my actions. The same thing you just mentioned. I used to avoid facing it because accepting that every decision I made came from a flawed, even cruel, motivation was too difficult. but maybe that's the first step toward taking responsibility. I'm beginning to understand that only when I see how my treatment of Luna was inexcusable will I actually have a chance to change. As I've said, I believe I need to stay away from people for a long while. I clung to Luna so tightly that I drained her spirit, thinking I was helping, when in reality I was only masking my dependence. I once comforted myself by saying I was her provider, that I supported her financially. But looking back, the help I gave was so small compared to the damage I caused. If you count the times I quit my job midway and left her to handle everything alone, she probably would have been better off if she had never met me. That's a hard truth to swallow. That for 8 years, I wasn't her support, I was her burden. I want to change, not to become a better man for someone else, but to become a normal human being. Someone who knows how to live decently, with himself and with the people he meets along the way. I want to learn how to be someone who brings safety, not fear. Luna showed me what that looks like. The kindness, patience, and forgiveness she gave me even when I didn't deserve it. She showed me what a healthy, gentle connection can be. I know I have to start from zero. To live alone, to learn how to build small, honest, simple relationships. Maybe years from now, I'll be able to think about love again, if by then I'm healed enough not to hurt someone. But love isn't my goal. My only goal is to learn to live more decently, so that if someone ever walks into my life again, they won't have to suffer the way Luna did. I know I can't turn back time, but I can stop repeating the same mistakes. I no longer dream of forgiveness or of going back. I just want, one day, to be able to look back and say that at least I didn't make anyone else endure me again. And I want to thank you, Marcel. I don't know if I truly have the strength to change, but I can see that you've just said something I've avoided for years. That I've been protecting my illusion, not the person I loved. Now all I can do is break that illusion, even if it means standing alone. I know this road will be long and lonely, but maybe, for the first time in my life, I'm not afraid of being alone anymore. I'm only afraid that if I don't walk it, I'll forever remain the man Luna had to run from.
Assuming you're not someone with a true personality disorder, someone completely incapable of guilt or empathy, I don't believe your actions were driven by malice. They weren't evil in the classical sense. They were rooted in pure selfishness. You knew perfectly well that what you were doing could destroy Luna. You knew you were lying, manipulating, controlling her with her own emotions. And you did it anyway. Not because you wanted to hurt her, but because what you wanted mattered more than anything else. It mattered more than love, more than morality, more than the consequences you saw coming. I don't see deliberate cruelty there. I see an uncontrollable craving, the kind of craving that makes a person willing to trample any boundary just to preserve a sense of power or the feeling of being alive. But when that craving outweighs all other values, it becomes a destructive force. And until you find the true source of that craving, you'll continue to carry it inside you, like a live fuse, waiting for the right moment to ignite. I'm not saying this to frighten you, but to remind you. The will to change isn't enough to stop it from repeating. Willpower is just the paint on the surface. Beneath it, the cracks remain untouched. You can promise never to do it again, but if you don't understand why you did it, that promise has no weight. If, on the day you were discovered, you had immediately confessed everything, no half-truths, no trickle truth, no holding anything back, I might have believed it was a chaotic phase that could be analyzed, a fog that could be explained. But the fact that you sustained the lies for years shows a near-pathological need, a part of you that lives off the satisfaction it brings, even as it destroys everything else. And the most frightening thing isn't what you did, it's that you still don't fully know what you were searching for. Was it sex, power, validation, or simply the feeling of being chosen, being noticed, while deep down you never believed you were worthy of love? I've spent most of my life observing people, and I've made the same mistake, trying to imitate goodness from the outside to fill the emptiness inside. But eventually I learned that every facade collapses when the core remains hollow. So the only advice I can give you is this: don't look for a role model to follow. Don't try to become a better version of someone. Look inward, look long enough until you recognize the wound that created that need. Once you face it, the craving will begin to lose its power. But if you keep avoiding it, you could live 10, 20 more years, love a few more people, and everything will start again in a different form but with the same root. I don't think you're a bad man, Adrian. I think you're a man who hasn't yet learned how to live with himself. And that perhaps is the very first step to stop hurting others. I noticed that you once wrote about how Luna had a tendency to take care of others. First, her abusive family, and later you. Meanwhile, you carried inside yourself a vast emptiness, a space that constantly longed to be cared for, to be reminded that you had worth. When two people like that meet, they easily become trapped in a loop of codependency. She needed to be needed to feel meaningful, and you needed to be cared for to forget your inner emptiness. You both thought you were in love, but in truth, you were sustaining each other's old wounds. The only way to escape that loop is to separate and learn to stand alone. Each of you must learn to regulate your emotions and rebuild your own life first, because if not, you'll keep draining each other, calling it love, until both of you collapse. I'm not saying this from judgment. I've been in a similar place myself. Growing up in violence and emotional coldness, I carried an endless void inside. I used to believe that if I could just find someone who loved deeply enough, who sacrificed enough, they could fill that void for me. But eventually I realized no one could. When I tried to use someone's love to cover my emptiness, I turned that love into a prison. I had to learn to expand my life, to meet more people, build other kinds of relationships, join support groups, go to therapy. When I developed more balanced connections, I slowly understood. No one is born to be another person's sole source of life. You said you couldn't live without her, that you panicked, that every time she walked away, you felt like you couldn't breathe. Do you see? That's the core of the issue. You've never felt safe or meaningful simply by being alone. So I want to ask you, and you don't need to answer right now, just think about it deeply. When was the last time you truly felt loved? Not out of pity, not from dependence, but real love. When was the last time you felt seen and valued without anyone having to save you from your own emptiness? And what have you done with the old wounds you've carried since childhood, the ones that make it unbearable for you to be alone with yourself? I believe only when you have the courage to seek those answers will love, any love, cease to be a battlefield, and finally return to what it was always meant to be, a safe place where both people can breathe.
Thank you, Marcel. Truly, thank you for what you just said. I think this is the first time in a very long while that someone has told me something so accurate, so painful, and yet so illuminating. You spoke about codependency. And yes, that's exactly what we struggled with for 8 years. We loved each other, but that love quickly turned into bondage. She was used to caring for others, and I was used to being saved. We kept orbiting each other, believing we were sharing a life, when in reality, we were keeping each other trapped in the same old roles. Even now, though her love for me is gone, we haven't completely separated. She still depends on me financially to some degree, something I must take responsibility for, since I'm the one who put her in that situation. For years, I pushed her into unstable living conditions, forcing her to carry the weight of survival. Now she's studying and working toward independence, but we still have to stay in touch to resolve financial matters. I know that cutting contact completely would be better for both of us, but right now, the best we can do is reduce contact gradually, to move toward a low contact arrangement, as she suggested. And I think that's the most responsible choice we can make. The truth is, we came from opposite worlds. She was born into cruelty, where violence and manipulation were the only languages spoken. Yet instead of becoming like them, she chose to be the opposite. Gentle, fair, kind. She once told me she never wanted anyone to feel what she had felt, and I believe her. Despite being abandoned, abused, and exploited, she walked out of the wreckage with a heart still capable of love and care. I, on the other hand, came from what people would call a good family. Educated parents, stable jobs, a life that looked flawless from the outside. But as I grew up, I realized that behind that perfection was a quiet, insidious kind of selfishness. My mother, especially, was someone who never examined herself. She could say kind words easily, but when someone in the family was truly suffering, she didn't know what to do except deny it or change the subject. 6 days after everything with Luna fell apart, my parents came to the apartment we had shared. I hadn't locked the door, a familiar kind of carelessness. They walked in, handed me a letter, and told me I was suffering from Stockholm Syndrome, that Luna was torturing me because she was angry. They hugged me, told me I was a good man, that I should forgive myself. I remember sitting there silently. I didn't cry. I wasn't angry. I just felt empty. They didn't understand. They didn't respect me enough to see the truth. Or maybe they simply didn't want to. In their eyes, I was still the good son, incapable of doing anything truly terrible. Admitting otherwise would mean they'd have to confront their own parenting. And that's something they were never willing to do. The sad part is, it wasn't just my parents. Everyone around me was the same. Friends, coworkers, people I'd known. No one ever truly held me accountable. I built a small world of people just like my parents. People who let me lie, avoid, and still feel fine. I cut ties with my two closest friends after realizing that. I saw that I'd been living in a world built to let me stay ungrown. And now I have to start over, to find people who will remind me that morality isn't what you say, it's what you do. I think you're right, Marcel. The hole inside me didn't start with Luna. It's been there for as long as I can remember, since before I even knew what love was. It grew with me, quietly, in a house that looked peaceful. I never learned how to endure loneliness. I always needed someone to fill the void, to confirm that I had value, that I was worth loving. But now, for the first time, I see clearly that no one can fill that space. Not Luna, not my parents, not friends, only I can learn to live with it, to stop fearing solitude, to sit in silence without needing anyone to save me. You asked me, when was the last time I truly felt loved? I don't know. Maybe when I was very young, before I learned that love had to come with expectations and perfection. You asked what I've done with my old wounds. I think for all these years, I haven't healed them. I've just passed them on. I made Luna carry the pain that was supposed to be mine. I turned her into my healer when I was the wound that never closed. Now I have to relearn everything. How to be alone, how to connect with friends, how to work without running from responsibility. I'm seeking therapy, and if I'm lucky, I'll find a support group. I think I need a community that can reflect the truth back to me, the way you just did today. I know it will take years, maybe a lifetime, but for the first time, I'm not afraid of that. I'm not afraid of the road ahead. I'm only afraid of going back. And once again, thank you, Marcel. Thank you for not telling me that I'll be okay, but for telling me that I have to make myself okay. I think you're right, Marcel. I've never truly felt safe or meaningful when I was alone. That I realize now is the root cause of why I turned to sex. Not as a pursuit of pleasure, but as a way to fill the void. It wasn't merely a need for validation. It was something deeper, almost primal, a fear of being alone with myself. I've come to understand that my sense of self is like a thin sheet of glass. One crack, and everything shatters. I have no inner foundation of worth. Luna told me this many times, that my entire sense of self-esteem didn't come from within, but from the reflections of others. She called it other esteem, a concept from Facing Codependence by Pia Mellody, and I think that's the most accurate definition of how I've existed. I was built entirely from other people's reflections. When no one mirrored me, I no longer knew who I was. So when I couldn't achieve the things I once tied my worth to, earning a PhD, mastering an instrument, learning a new language, I collapsed. Not because I failed, but because I had nothing left to cling to. My whole identity was tied to doing, not being. When those goals dissolved, I was empty. I hated myself, not only for what I did to Luna, but because I had no inner foundation to stand on. I was a collection of behaviors, not a person. I had never truly experienced love or nurturing in its real form before Luna. My mother indulged me superficially, without guidance or structure, never teaching me how to become someone of substance and responsibility. My father, though a good provider, was emotionally absent. They taught me how to exist, not how to live. Every relationship I've had since then was the same: shallow, transactional, based on convenience or momentary need. Then Luna appeared. She was the first person who truly saw me, who touched the human part of me I thought had died. She loved me with a kind of love I didn't know how to receive because I had never understood it. I loved her deeply and instinctively, but at the same time, I had no idea how to love her back. Everything she loved about me, the warmth, the sensitivity, the gentleness, were parts of me I had buried long ago. When she tried to awaken them, I couldn't. I was afraid. I retreated into my distorted world, and in the end, I lost her, along with the only chance I had to become a real person. Sometimes I think I've lost my one chance at being human. I know saying that sounds selfish, because my regret still hurts her, but the feeling is painfully real. I didn't just lose the woman I loved. I lost the version of myself I could have become if I'd listened to her sooner. I never truly faced my pain. In my home, self-reflection was considered weakness. My parents, especially my mother, were strongly opposed to introspection. She once sent me to therapy as a child, but only as a behavioral correction, not as a path to understanding. I believe neither of them ever understood what therapy really meant, or ever thought it necessary. I grew up in a world that taught me, as long as you behave decently on the surface, everything inside will fix itself. And I carried that lie with me until now. I don't know where to begin. I've tried therapy many times, even when I was still with Luna, but it never really worked. Part of it was my fault. I wasn't honest, or I only told half-truths. But there were times when I was truly open, as honest as I am now, and still, the result was the same. Therapists often told me I should leave Luna, return to school, focus on myself. I understood why they said that. They saw the dependency, the immaturity that made me unfit as a partner. Luna agreed that they weren't wrong. Maybe they thought, this man needs to learn how to be human before he learns how to love. There were times I went to therapy just to hear that I wasn't that bad. Other times, I truly went hoping to change. But every road led to the same feeling, being locked out of humanity. It felt as though everyone was silently saying, you don't deserve love or understanding until you become someone else. I know I have a long way to go before I can become a person who's safe for others, let alone a true partner. But honestly, I still don't know what that path looks like. I know I have to start small, learning how to connect, how to make friends, how to tell the truth without fearing that honesty will cost me someone's affection. But while that sounds simple, it feels almost impossible. I've never been the one to initiate relationships. From childhood to now, everyone in my life has been the one to reach out first, to pull me out of my shell. I don't know how to step toward others, how to intentionally build meaningful connections. That thought overwhelms me, like I have to learn to walk again, but this time with my soul, not my legs. It might take decades, but if that's what it takes to stop hurting others, I'm willing. I don't expect to return to who I was or to be forgiven. I only hope that one day I'll wake up, look in the mirror, and no longer see a fraud. I want to see a human being. Small, perhaps, but real. And if that's all I ever achieve in this life, I'll still call it redemption.
I'm truly glad you chose to share more tonight. If I believed helping you was hopeless, I wouldn't be sitting here. No one is ever beyond redemption, as long as they still have the courage to look at themselves, not with intellect, but with honesty. You asked where you should begin. I think you should start from the real beginning, the place where your first wounds were made. Your childhood, your family, the way you learned to love through distorted mirrors. You've been to therapy, you've read the right books, but maybe no one has ever told you this clearly. Every destructive act begins with a desire that was never named. Human behavior has 3 layers: a deep desire, an inner belief, and outward action. You've been focused on the last layer, trying to control your behavior, to resist impulses, to fix what's visible. But you can't keep fighting on the surface when the roots run deep underground. You have to go down, Adrian, to touch the place where that desire was first born. Ask yourself, what is it that I needed so desperately that I was willing to destroy everything to have it. What did it give me? Power, attention, or simply the feeling of being alive? When you can answer that, you'll know where your healing must begin. Let me remind you, self-disgust is not the end. It's the door. Once you walk through it, you'll see that the most frightening thing isn't your past. It's learning to live a life without excuses. But it's in that raw, unguarded place that character begins to form. There's a book I want you to read, Make Sense of Your Story by Adam Young. It doesn't teach forgiveness, it teaches understanding. It helps you see your life as a story to be decoded, not a list of sins to be erased. I say this not as someone who's got it right, but as someone who has walked the same road you're on. I too lost a remarkable woman. I too lied, betrayed, and destroyed what I loved most. I once thought that remorse was enough, but I was wrong. Letting go was the hardest part, not because I stopped loving her, but because I knew I no longer deserved to hold on. You owe Luna that, Adrian. You owe her the peace you once took away. I used to wake every morning with guilt pressing down on my chest, wondering if it would ever fade. Then I realized guilt isn't meant to be forgotten. It's meant to be carried. Like a stone in your pocket, heavy, but, slowly worn smooth over time if you keep doing what's right. I changed my life. I quit drinking, quit drugs, quit chasing validation in the eyes of others. I returned to my body. Exercised, worked, wrote, prayed, and learned to be silent. I rebuilt my life brick by brick. There were days when the loneliness felt unbearable. But in that solitude, I began to hear my real voice. Not the voice of a man desperate to be loved, but of a person learning to love life itself, even when no one was watching. When I stopped running from myself, and when I stopped saying, I'll change, and started living as if I already had, the world around me shifted. Not because someone forgave me, but because I learned that forgiving myself was the final stage of punishment. Adrian, Luna may never forgive you. She may carry that wound for the rest of her life. But if one day she looks back and sees that you've truly become someone different, calm, kind, without anger or deceit, maybe she won't smile, but her heart will feel a little lighter. And in that moment, you'll have returned to her a fragment of the peace she deserves. I don't ask you to believe in God or any higher power. I only ask you to believe in the possibility of human rebirth. People can change, not because they are loved, but because they've learned how they once loved wrong. You can't erase the past, Adrian, but you can redefine the present. And if one morning you look into the mirror and see a face you no longer hate, not because it's perfect, but because it's honest, then you'll understand. Redemption doesn't come from being forgiven. It comes from never repeating the sin. Now let Luna go. Let her live a life where she doesn't have to fix you anymore, and spend the rest of your life becoming the man she once believed you could be. In the end, perhaps the most terrifying part of being human isn't losing someone. It's realizing how long we've lived without truly knowing who we are. But recognizing our wrongs and choosing to live differently, that is where redemption begins. Not to be forgiven, but to no longer need forgiveness. We cannot turn back time, but we can choose how to move forward. Lighter, truer, and for the first time, brave enough to stay with ourselves. Thank you all for listening and for your empathy. Please take a moment to leave a sincere message for Adrian. Your words may mean more than you think. Good night, and we'll see you next time on The Silence Within.